Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Today's presentation, Going for the Gold with BI Publisher. My name is Doug McCarthy. I'm the VP of Sales and Operations at Team Kane. I've been here for 3+ years. Been a while, started off on the CNC side, 17 years working with JDE. And then Rain Dalton, who will do the majority of the presentation today, has been over 2 years now, Rain, with us?
Yeah, 2+ years.
Seems like it's
yeah,
been a
coming
while.
up 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so he is our BI Publisher expert. Rain, you're located in Calgary?
Calgary, yes, up in Canada.
Very nice. So that'll explain all the funny accent that he'll have.
Yes,
and I'm actually based in the U.S. here in Connecticut. So for our agenda today, we've got the Olympics motif, thanks to our marketing folks, very talented that they are, came up with this for us, which is fantastic. Main events, we're going to talk about POs, invoices, and some work that we've done in extending check processing, AP checks, payroll checks, etc. Then we'll get to perfect tens, what makes a sophisticated form, kind of just a little chat about the difference between your basic maybe PO and what you can step it up with, and getting a perfect 10 with some of the more sophisticated or more complex development issues around those forms. Then we'll move into like the luge, but from your desk. I often feel like I'm moving very quickly on my desk, so I should shape it like a luge. But we'll talk about how our fast track process can get you up and running a lot quicker than what you might expect. We'll talk a little bit about the competition and how BI Publisher compares with that. And then for our medal ceremony, we'll talk about available packages and designs that we have available today. All right, starting off, main events, POs, invoices, extended check processing.
All right, excellent. So for the main event here, we'll just be talking about some of the purchase orders, the extended check processing, some of the major players that we've dealt with over the years, and how we're going to look at approaching it and presenting the BI Publisher approach for these forms. So when you're looking at a purchase order, one of the major things that you want to include in it and the transition to the BI Publisher from whichever third party or in JDE reports you're using is the ability to potentially support some French language and totals, different languages for it. On the left side here, you can see an image of just an example of our output, one that we've designed for BI Publisher. So as I'm going through this, that's kind of what I'm referring to. So for the French language and totals, it's you can see that it says facture at the top instead of just invoice. So being able to handle a French or an English or multiple languages for it. At the bottom, we'll have some tax information that's shown on a little bit of a breakdown. Sorry for the image fidelity, can't really read it, but it's there, I promise. We're looking at the details section in the center here for the actual content that automatically sizes based on the information that's there, whether it's just one description line, multiple description lines, or item information. We're looking at if it's a reprint of a purchase order, are we looking for additional watermarks or any indicator that it's a reprint, some content in it to show the big difference between the two. We also have the accountability for continuation of headers and footers. So if the detail overflows to multiple pages, you want the real important information to be there as the pages grow and resize based on the dynamic content. We're looking at adding any logic for the fields, so whether they should be displayed, not displayed, or if there's any calculations done or restructuring of that data based on some conditional information. So if it's, for example, bank account 1, show this static text, bank 2, this static text. Some of that logic we're looking to account for in the designs here. And then we also looking for some options on totals for when you're printing and there's overflow of multiple pages. There will be calculations and displays for continuation on the totals this page summary, and then a final total at the end. So you can keep track of large TELUS bill invoices, TELUS bill purchase orders, to large detail lines, keeping track of the calculations as it goes forward. So I'm kind of talking about POs and invoices almost at the same time. A lot of this information is present in both. So I'll just switch over here to invoice, get a little bit more detail. In this example, we can see we're looking at an English language and totals. We also have accountability for the standard stuff that I just talked about, tax information, dynamic details section, reprint, and the headers being moved forward and forward. The example you can see here, we have subtotals only on the first page. Because this is continuing on to multiple pages, that's the continuation and the totals I was talking about. And it's at the bottom there in a little pink. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. So at the bottom, you can see that information. One thing that we've also looked at including is the ability for terms and conditions to be present. So either at the end of your invoice or at the back of every page. Now, there has been a lot of difficulty for some developers when it comes to be a publisher of incorporating that capability. So we've taken that under ourselves to incorporate in some of the designs, and you have the ability to see those and account for that. So that's on the back of every page, and on a PDF it'll be like on every second page, so based on your printing preferences there. You also, at the top, you can see that we have a Team King logo. So that's another addition here, is whether you want the logos to show, whether they will be there, and if there's any logic that drives it, looking to account for that as well. The header information on the invoiced to address and the shipped to addresses are currently, they're designed to fit within the number 10 envelope already. So if you're taking one right out of the package, we can print it and it should be able to fold no problem, and you'll have the address line already show in the envelope window. So one less thing to really account for and size up, a lot less testing. And just moving on, one of our latest development efforts is extended check processing. So with this is our developers have designed an extension to the F0030 bank file and a maintenance application to that made some changes to the US and Canadian bank reports, or the check reports. So RO4572, RO4572C. So for the custom programs that we've done is 550030 and P550030. So what does it mean is, what we've done is we've designed a form, we've designed this application that enables you the ability to maintain signature limits. So if you have a check with 2 signatures, you can define signature limits for not displaying any signatures, only one or both, based on the actual monetary value of that check. And with that, kind of aligned with that, is defining the location of the signature files, so you can place it somewhere, control which signatures are placed under which of these limits without actually going in and doing any development. It's just pulling from a location. So you have the ability here to define where that location is. And also the microline itself, which includes the check number, the transit, the bank account. That's pretty lengthy there. One typical approach for third party or the JDE standards, that it's either based on some kind of built-in logic or it's static text based on a bank account number, etc. So we've taken all of that under the wing of this application here, where you can define what the microline will be, and it's based on a bank account. So you're defining the bank account and what the microline will be. So what this means is you have this ability to maintain all of this, and when you're actually incorporating this check process, this check maintenance application with the BI publisher packs that we've made, is maintain it all, and when you run the check, it will pull all of this information you've defined, and the output will already have the information there. So it allows a lot more user control and incorporated with the BI publisher outputs. One development effort that we've really prioritized for now, and extending this even further, is being able to assign logos based on the bank account as well. So these logos, like the signatures, will be on a network location, for example, and you can define where that is and which bank account will drive which logos are shown. There's also the ability to override some of the bank names and addresses. So if it's a standard one being pulled for 10 of the bank accounts, now you have the ability to say, well, for 3 of those specifically, we want this name and this address instead. So again, a lot more intricate control on how that is. The benefit of all of this, like I said, is maintaining it all in the forms, maintaining it all in the menus, and then when you run it, it's there. So the full microline is being passed through to the BI Publisher design. So there's no logic done in the actual design itself, none of that template. So any changes do not require additional development. It's just creating a couple more rows in this bank file, this bank program. So the one thing, kind of summing this all up here, this eliminates the need for coding in BI Publisher because it gives the user all the control.
And
I'll pass on some
Rain,
customer stories to you. Yes, sir.
I can talk through part of this, or you can continue. What I did want to say, that just following up on the one note that you said, giving the control back to the user. I think the key part of that is the user doesn't necessarily need to be a developer anymore, since all of the heavy lifting is already done. So a business analyst, even a business user, like someone in purchasing or finance, has the ability or can very quickly be shown the skills to maintain the forms moving forward. You can take it out of IT's hands if that is the direction that you would want to go.
Yes.
Okay, just giving a quick look, see if we have any questions. I don't see any yet, but just a reminder, everybody, that panel is on the right side, and if something comes up that you'd like us to go into more detail on, or something's not clear, please let us know. Of course, we'll keep that confidential of who's asking, so no worries about that. So, Rain, do you want to talk through Dream, or shall I?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to do just kind of a high level. Dream Real Estate organization in Canada had a whole lot of changes that were needed on a regular basis to their create form scripts, which was just the opposite of what we just talked about, where they needed a developer. A lot of times it was an external developer, so hard to schedule and not necessarily inexpensive. So they wanted to see what they could do in changing that. So we offered to build in a customization for them to handle all of the kind of changes that they were doing at the code level through the front end of JD Edwards. Some of the things that made it important for them is with real estate, there is lots of different bank accounts involved, lots of different signatures, depending on amounts, what account, what bank, etc. So the front end gave the users the ability that if they needed to change a bank account, or they needed, which then of course changes a microline, or if someone, a signatory, maybe left the company and they needed to update that, that's all possible through the custom screen, custom front end that we built all within JD Edwards. So start to finish in about 2 months. That's testing, coding, getting it to production. So now that development has been done, that can be done even quicker today if someone else. And we have actually now used the same set of code or the same customizations at additional customers. Just Dream was the first one that we did that for. So the takeaway: simplify the JDE footprint and architecture for multi-bank setup, eliminating the need for external developers or developers in general for a complex business need. Anything to add on that one, Rain?
Nope, that's absolutely correct.
All right. Okay, so next section, getting perfect tens. So does that just bring back childhood memories, Rain, of when you're at the pool and giving everybody's rating your cannonball or whatever it is jumping into the pool? That's always what I think of.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so what makes a sophisticated form? All right, let's dig in.
Okay, so really getting into here, this slide's mostly talking about the areas of these forms that developers know very well, but for anybody who's trying to dive into this, they're often overlooked or not really considered. And then when actually designing comes into play or developing for these BI Publisher forms, these are areas where people struggle with. So what we've done is taken that into consideration when we actually develop these forms. We've developed it with all of these as a base already. So all of these like sophisticated logic or complicated code or for calculations is already in there. So it can kind of hit the ground running with already being good to go with all of these. So just starting it off here, we have conditional outputs. So what that means is whether some of the information, a field, is either shown or not shown based on some data. So if, for example, an item number is the same as a second item number for that particular row on an invoice or PO, you have two item numbers that you want to display. If it's the same, then we don't need to show both. We'll only show one, so reduce redundant information. Or if we have a check with a certain limit, for example, and the check is already within an agreeable amount, then have a signature in place already. So if it's under 10,000, we already want there to be a signature because we're good for approving checks under that amount. And then for ease of keeping development, there will be a watermark if we're doing any of these runs in PY or DV. So a draft watermark, for example, or void or anything like that. But then without any additional development, if it's produced in production, there will be no watermark. So that's kind of something we've already implemented in our designs here. For images such as the logos or the signatures or any other cool pictures that you want to put in the development or the designs here, we have set sizing for it. So with that, if you have any image that you want and it's being pulled from a location, it's already being resized with a certain X or Y. So that's one thing that was a bit difficult for some people to design because you just show the picture, but pictures are obviously not all the same size. And then if it's not this, specific size, it can push some of the content and modify the layout unexpectedly. Another item would be keeping the sections together across the pages. So if there's an overflow of information, multiple detail lines exceeding what the page limits are, then we want to keep the sections together so the header will still be at the top. The details will still flow fluently with some of the column headers that are still there on the next pages. And then the footer is only displayed at the end, or kind of continuation footers, to keep the information together and keep the sections fluid across the pages. And we've kind of prided ourselves in this, but we want to approach this with a smart design. So the documents that we have here, we're looking for that to reflect your company image. So your font sizes or a professional layout, boxes and shadings in the proper areas, because this is customer facing and you want to have that reflect your reputation and the professionalism of these documents. So we have these designs that that are ready to go and trying to have that in mind already. So we don't have to do too much on making it look a certain way. They're out of the box, good to go. For the headers and the footers that I'm talking about as they are continued across the different pages, we're kind of kept them in a smart design there so that it's only using as much real estate as possible. Displaying the information that's necessary, that's important, but not taking up any additional spacing. So that's just something that you don't typically see, as if you're just seeing the outputs, you don't really know what you're looking at. But when you're developing these, designers often struggle in being smart about real estate utilization. So that's one thing we took serious with this, and making sure we can get all the information on a page and all of it not using more than necessary. We'll go into a little bit more about this later in the presentation, but for language and currency display, we've developed multiple languages and currencies kind of already incorporated. So with that, if you have a language flag or if you want to manually control it, for example, then these templates already have an English, a French, and a Spanish language output. So the actual field names themselves will change based on a trigger. And with that, some of the currencies, such as French, have different formats. So that's already incorporated in the designs. We've already really talked about the auto sizing, but what that really means is if you have one detail line, but the detail may have additional information, line attachments, additional notes, additional description fields that you want to display when they exist and only when they exist. The sections that have that need to automatically size. It needs to be dynamic. So that's already accounted for, and we can obviously work with you if it's certain specifics that need to be done. That's already in there. We can add it, remove it, etc. One real benefit, one major benefit here with BI Publisher is that these designs, with all of the capabilities of conditional logic and conditional fields and logos and all of that, is that at the end, usually, more often than not, we're able to consolidate multiple versions into one. So instead of you having, for example, 13 different invoice versions and each one really has a different company name or has a different watermark, etc., all of that can be done with only one BI Publisher template. So you can consolidate all of those versions into only one template. And so, often they're not really needed for you to have many different versions except for just a quick text change. But that's a real benefit there. So if anything needs to be changed in the future, you only have to do it in the one template. So just kind of a visual on some of the items that we've talked about. If you need a logo, that's often data dependent. So is that driven by a company ID, company information itself, the name, the address lines? Do you need that to show? Is it driven by what data is it driven by? Company ID again, or anything else? Certain text. If it's a reprint, you need a watermark, some additional text to distinguish between the two. Are there header attachments, additional header information for delivery information, currency, branch? Does that need to be displayed? If not, then it doesn't need to. If it does, where and how, right? So all these kind of questions for when you start the development. But for ours, we've taken these into consideration already. Line details, variable sized, so they need to be dynamic. And the language, is it French, English, Spanish? For example, are there other ones? And do the currency need to change? Does the currency need to change based on that trigger, the formatting of it? So this is just a simple kind of image of that, but that simple image reflects all of those questions already asked, and you don't see all the intricacies behind it, but when you're designing it, those are things you need to think about, and we've already taken that into consideration. Just at the bottom of that same form, does the tax information need to show, and how's it split? Does your report already split it and we just need to display it, or does some logic need to be incorporated for it? If it's an overflow to multiple pages, do you have a continuation footer or a continuation header, just saying continued, or is there a running total? At the bottom, do you need signatures there? Are they automatically applied based on certain limits, or are we just keeping a line there for manual signage? If lines, like detail lines themselves, split over a page, you usually want to keep the full line together, so you force, instead of just letting it overflow and having the actual line number on the previous page and then details on the next one, you want to keep that together, so force that entire line to the next page. And then lastly, terms and conditions. Do you need them? And do you want them at the end or on the back of every page? So that's for duplex printing. You can take care of that, but the design accounts for that, and it's implemented on the back of every page, so every second page on the output. Or you can have, we have a design that's only at the end. And one real like, there's more of a development thing, but real struggle is if you do have these terms and conditions, you don't want those to be included in the page numbering. And then standard design would just account every page that's produced in the page numbering. But what we've done is kind of taken account of that and not include terms and conditions pages with the page numbers.
So one quick note on that first item that you were talking about on the last page, Rain, splitting the tax jurisdiction. For our U.S.-based folks that maybe weren't following that, that's primarily used for the GST, PST type of separation for Canadian companies, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Right. A lot of times we do have U.S. companies that come, being that we are Canadian-based, but of course are familiar with U.S. policies and needs as well. So if you have a run of invoices, you can have that dynamically changed based on maybe the location of the company or a particular code that you're using somewhere that's in the XML to trigger what that format will look like, which goes along with the line or the part that Rain was talking about and being able to simplify down to one template that can handle lots of different scenarios. So,
yeah,
just want to add that in. All right, so time for the luge from our desks. So everybody strap in, make sure you're pointing your toes like the gentleman or woman, hard to tell from this angle, proper form. But we're going to talk a little bit about our fast track process. And again, reminder, questions if you have them. So the bottom line, the big word there, accelerates the start and completion of your project. I'll talk about one scenario. But what this allows you to do is take your whatever forms management that you're doing today, look at that, compare that to BI Publisher templates or what can be done in BI Publisher and quickly come off of that third-party application and straight to BI Publisher, which of course is included in your JD Edwards license. So a government entity out west was working on their AP checks for quite some time. We have 8 weeks in there, just maybe that was when they were dedicating maybe a full-time person to it, but they had actually been working on the process for close to a year prior to that, just trying to get things figured out and seeing how they could convert over. And then they, I think, either at a conference or maybe on a webinar, saw what we were offering for BI Publisher. Go to the next one there, Rain.
Yeah.
So once we were involved and we had our BI Publisher template for their AP checks, within 2 weeks, they were completely done, had pushed things to production and were off and running. So if we go to the next one. So just throwing out kind of some base numbers. If you were to figure out a fully burdened salary for a developer, say $75 per hour US, 8 weeks, 320 hours, that's $24,000 of what was spent. And so an AP check BI Publisher pack, which we would offer list price. So I always wink, wink, nudge, nudge, list price, depending on how many you're buying. There's always potentially better pricing there. But 5,000, 8 hours of consulting to do the tweaks and kind of configure to exactly what this customer wanted. Total cost, $6,200. So not only is it saving money, but it's freeing up your internal resources so that they can work on other things and get more projects to the business users. Okay, another customer story, the Dixie Group, carpet retail manufacturing down south. Georgia. Right,
Georgia,
right?
Yeah.
Thanks. So we were working with the Dixie Group to upgrade them to 9.2, and as part of that upgrade, they decided that they wanted to move their forms management from Optio to BI Publisher. Often what we see in a lot of those third-party products is when they need to go to a newer release of JD Edwards, they also then need to upgrade their hardware for the third party. They need to upgrade that, and all of a sudden that becomes a project on its own. So they thought instead of going down that path, this was the perfect time to migrate over to BI Publisher. So they didn't really have anyone on staff that had any BI Publisher skills, nor the time to really get up to speed from be an expert type of thing. So they asked us to kind of do it from start to finish, like go ahead and design their templates, looking at what they had today. And we estimated about a month, or no, they estimated about a month for doing the basic design. Is that right, Ryan?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So they ended up getting the publisher packs for AP checks, invoices, payroll checks. We did some small updates so that they mostly mirrored what they had existing. And then we took like maybe 10, 12 hours and did some training with a couple of their folks so that they could maintain them moving forward. It went live as part of the 9.2 go live. And other than a couple of small questions here and there, they've taken all of that maintenance in-house. So huge win for them, simplification of their footprint and their requirement for third-party software decreased as well.
Right, and I just want to note that some of these the employees that we're training, they weren't developers by any means. These were users, power users that took it under themselves to learn the kind of maintenance required. So going forward, they still have taken it in-house, and it's not as though they had a huge development background or anything of that nature.
Right, absolutely, good point.
Good.
All right. So sizing up the competition just carries on with what we were just talking about a little bit, but BI Publisher versus third-party software. So as we are all familiar with, 20 to 22% annual maintenance on most products that you're using in your environment. And then if you don't have the internal skills, then you're dependent on the external consultants, which I mentioned previously can be tough to schedule and expensive, depending on what product you're talking about. And of course, yes, Team Kane, we are primarily a consulting company, so we get it. But we also don't like to sell things to people that they don't need. And so going with the BI Publisher, the fast track process, it's helping you reduce costs from that annual maintenance from expensive consultants, because you're going to invest in your internal staff very quickly, getting them up to speed and having the ability to maintain the future changes as they come up. I mean, of course, if there's a big change or high development, then it's usually just a small external need to maybe make those heavy lifting changes, and then you're off and maintaining those on your own again. And with the BI Publisher, there's no maintenance costs for the BI Publisher packs that we provide. Once you have that upfront cost, and then you're off and running. So we mentioned about the risk of incompatibility when you want to upgrade JD Edwards. Maybe the third-party product that you're using isn't certified for that new product, or just different risks that can come up as part of that. So if you're on the Oracle stack, you've got a little bit better sense of that they're going to be able to work together, or they're going to have the updates coming out at the same time, so that's not going to hold you up or create any adverse or extra costs. So a couple things: coexistence, multi-foundation, the tool sets, all of those are taken into consideration. Oracle, of course, is continuing support for BI Publisher. When you are upgrading, it's built right in. It's part of the product. It's not like a customized or third-party app where you have to worry about integrating that back in. There are the browser compatibility, whatever's available in JD Edwards, again, is going to work fine with your BI Publisher piece. So all in all, you're in sync across your software packages.
So we've been talking a lot about BI Publisher and how some of the packages we've made and some of the development efforts we've put forward to really expedite and include a fast track process on getting it to you and getting you up to speed with it. But what exactly does that entail? What exactly is this BI Publisher that we're talking about? So I just want to go over some of the basics of what we're exactly talking about, and maybe if you've heard BI Publisher before, there's the two different versions out there. So there's the embedded version. That's the one that we're talking about today. That really takes care of your batch jobs. When you're running your batch reports, BI Publisher integrates with that, molds the, I'll say mold, but it molds the design, the BI Publisher design with your report. And the output will be this designed template output instead of a raw JDE output. But it's using the same data that a report would. The other version is an enterprise version for BI Publisher, and that's more of a reporting solution. So that's integrated with OneView reports, for example, or some of the business intelligence reports for JDE. So that's the enterprise version, and we're talking about the embedded. The embedded version makes use of report definitions and BI Publisher templates. In the next slide, I'll go a little bit more in detail what that really entails. But a report definition defines how the report's going to behave, where it's going to go to a printer, to an email, to a network location. So it defines how that report's being delivered. And then the BI Publisher template, that's an object itself. It's just an object that holds the design that we're making. So your UBEs look at the report definition, which then uses the template for the output. So those three, they work together. BI Publisher works with a JDE XML output. So that's seamlessly integrated. It's all behind the scenes. You won't really ever see an XML output, but that's a way for JDE to communicate the data on your report when you're running it, your invoices, checks, whatever report. It's compiled in an XML format behind the scenes, and that's being pushed into the design template, the BI Publisher template. And it kind of takes that data and displays it in a certain way. All of the development for BI Publisher is done in Microsoft Word. So it's, Word, I believe they've just recently supported Microsoft Word 2016 officially, or sorry, 2013, not 2016 yet. So how development is done is there's a development plugin that you can download from the Oracle site, and that adds a new ribbon object at the top, or new ribbon at the top with your development objects that you can select from and add fields, etc. So that's really great that you can do all of the development outside of JDE. You don't need to know the JDE report design aids or any of that. It's all done in Microsoft Word. And theoretically, we can develop a pixel perfect design because Microsoft Word has a lot of capabilities on grid designs and formatting. You can really get down to like moving things by pixel, getting exactly what you're looking for. There is a little bit of involvement with JDE when you're setting this all up. Some of these are items that are maybe overlooked or not really clarified when you're getting started with BI Publisher. But most steps are done on the FAT client. You can do them in the menus, but at least one of these steps you can only do in the FAT client. And the reason I say that's because the standard permissions don't allow you to do it in the menus. So I'm just going to basically go through just a quick couple of steps of what you would do when you get started for making BI Publisher design. The first thing you do is you'd create the template object. So in OMW, that's the XML Publisher object. So typically this is done in the FAT client, so you create a new project and you would add this object to it. Right off the bat, you could add a blank RTF file, a blank template file to it, and that'll just house a blank design for now, but at least this object is created. And if you're starting to make this object, but you already have some of the templates from Team Kane, for example, you can upload the template to that object already. So that's what that template object is. It just houses the design. Then you would create the report definition, or RD for short, in the FAT client. And in there, you would specify the source UBE, a source version, and the XML template from the previous step. So before I get into the last part of that, what that would be is you're saying that this report definition is meant to be working with my R04572 version ZJDE 001, for example. And I want that to use the XML object I just created. So when you're running that UBE, that version, it uses this report definition instead of not using it at all. And as I mentioned before, the report definition defines what the report does. So in here, you would also explain, or you would configure the bursting, if you want that done, how you're going to split that out by vendor number, et cetera, sending it to specific printers, emails, and all of that kind of output objects. Then the third step here, this is the one that really you can only do in the fact client, is you would pull in the actual UBE version, and then you would go and modify the version of that and tell it to use the report definition. So you check that object out, go and configure it, and specify the report definition that you just created. So the designs here are version specific. So you can do a one-to-one, one UBE version to one report definition, or you can leave it a little open-ended and say, I want all 7 of my invoice versions, all 7 of my UBEs versions here to look at this one design. So you can do a many-to-one relationship as well. The report definition links to the template. So that's the important connection there, is UBE version to the report definition, and the report definition specifies the template it uses. Again, you're creating the template in Word, and during your design, you're linking it to the XML fields. So that's the, like I said, the background data that's being passed. And you would also, during the design, specify any logic, conditions, calculations, and any of the fancy stuff in there. And then when you're done with the design, you can upload it straight to that XML publisher object, or you can just go into the menus and go to P95600, which is just a repository for your XML publisher objects. So once you've created it all, going forward, any changes, you would just go into P95600 and upload the new template. Before we go forward, I see that there's a question about the designs being done in Microsoft Word. Is there an Excel plugin? Yes, there is. So the plugin that's there, you'd go to the Oracle website and you would download that plugin, and I think it is a Word-specific one, but they do have ones for Excel as well. All these designs that we're talking about are primarily done in Microsoft Word because of the flexibility, but if you're looking for Excel outputs, there is an ability to add that as well. There's also the ability to actually make very basic designs on PDF forms as well. But those are very basic and don't have a lot of the flexibility. Microsoft Word would be your best bet, but you can also design it in Word and have the output be in Excel. So if you're really looking for that kind of capabilities. Doug?
All right. Thanks, Rain. So Ledcor, another customer story that we've done a lot of BI Publisher work with. They were a create form shop in that they had been doing a lot of development for all their different forms for many years. And actually, prior to both Rain and I, Team Kane was a partner with Bottom Line or for Create Form, and so we have a lot of knowledge still in-house, and gives us the ability to go in and look at your Create Form projects and determine what's being done, giving us the ability to go in and look at what's being done with Create Form, which was helpful if you don't have documentation on maybe what all of your design templates are doing. So in a first go-round with them back in 2015, we did some accounts receivable or different registers, just some standard reports, AR statements, all listed there. Kind of went through and did that, and then after they came up with their second cut of what reports were still on Create Form. I believe it was due to they wanted to not pay maintenance any longer, didn't want to have to upgrade that. So they came back all of a sudden under a very tight deadline, and we needed to move 22 additional payroll reports and registers, lots of different components that were involved with ImageNow and the pay stub for email delivery to the employees, et cetera, all needs to get done. And so we worked in conjunction with the lead core staff in dividing up all of the amount of work and all of the detailed development work that needs to get done to be able to meet that deadline. The key takeaway is that no matter how complicated it is, if you maybe have to do it in chunks or a hybrid solution of internal and external resources, you can get that migration done from a third party to BI Publisher. As we pointed out with one of the other stories in Dream, or perhaps you may need to include a little JD Edwards development to make sure that the right data gets into the XML so that you can act on it in BI Publisher. But one way or another, you can get that migration done from whatever forms package that you're using over to BI Publisher. Okay.
So here's just a little overview of some useful documents to check out if you're interested in BI Publisher development or capabilities of it, or if you can look into integrating it with your system, or if you're looking for some team gain assistance, making sure that you're up to speed and maybe being able to tackle it once we get involved. There's doc IDs here, not actual links, because you will be required to log in to the actual Oracle support site. But document ID there, 2198754, is just a BI Publisher kind of documentation on what desktop development version, so the plugin version that you need to download, and what Microsoft version supports that version, and basically overall what development versions Oracle supports. And if you have specific development, for example, 8.9, JDE 8.9, or even prior to that, or if you're looking for 9.2 development, you need to, the designs need to be made in specific Microsoft Word year versions, as well as a specific plugin version that needs to be downloaded. So that gives you version control information there. And then document 125274 kind of goes over some basic known issues for when you're looking at the embedded BI Publisher. This is more specifically if you're looking at older versions of JDE. As they've gone through upgrading JDE versions, they've looked at the core engine of BI and how that works with E1. So they've dealt with a lot of it. So this gives you information on what they've fixed and what kind of issues were present in the previous versions. So just some useful documentations to go take a look at.
All right. Yep. Medal ceremony, which means we're getting towards the end. We've got just a few minutes left, so we'll quickly go through the designs and packages that we have available. So, pulling it all together, I can take that if you want, Rain. Just we're pre-configured, easy to maintain, production-ready designs. It's out of the box if you want it to be. You're not worried about matching what you're using today, or maybe you're not. You're just getting into sending invoices to customers. You can grab the template and be in production within hours. You can control the logo, global messages, all those different pieces that Rain went through, languages, especially if you need to be able to dynamically switch. All of that is built into the templates. Every field that is commonly used on a particular form are already there, so it's very easy for you to add it onto a form or take it off if you don't want it. A lot of times people ask about custom versions. If you have an R55 version of the invoice, and maybe on your custom version, all that's different is where you have the date field. That will most likely, that will very easily work with our template so that you can upgrade to the more sophisticated and really a better image of what your company is presenting out to its customers or vendors, whoever it might be. One thing we're always willing, if you would like to send us an XML document of a particular form that you're using today, we can show you what it looks like out of the box from our template and probably give you an estimate of what it would take to make changes that you would, if you want to outline that. Very easy for us to do that. But bottom line, you load it and you go. So we've got all the forms listed there. We have templates pre-built for all of those. The bottom one, custom reports, that's usually pretty straightforward. We're not going to have a template for what your custom report is, but we've got the base, so it's usually a simple piece. Tax forms, you actually can get all of those forms from Oracle. That's not something that we offer. We just want to make sure that people are aware that that's out there for you to go and grab. Most of the time, if there's changes in those forms, that'll be part of your year-end update. Okay, next. Right.
Yeah, there we go.
Right. So we do have two levels of packages, gold and platinum. Gold is pay. All I need is a PO just to get it in and get it out. It doesn't need to be fancy. Maybe you don't use it externally or something along those lines. And then the platinum packages is where you get all that sophistication and the higher end development work for the more sophisticated pieces that are listed there. Bottom line on that one, discounts available for multiple packages, licenses, etc. So always willing to talk through situations like that. We mentioned before, there's no annual maintenance on those. That's just a one-time upfront cost. So lots to cheer about this February. Buy more, save more. Up to 50% off gold or platinum via publisher packs. It's through the last day of business, I believe, in February. So you can contact me. I think we'll have our contact information here in a couple of slides. Feel free to reach out with any needs or questions that you have post-webinar as well. I don't know, Rain, did you go through the fun fact of the day there at the bottom? I thought that was pretty cool.
That's pretty interesting information there. Yeah.
So kind of a naming the background for the mascot, protection, the Korean word. So I'll let you guys read through that, but pretty cool as we're getting up closer to the start of the Olympics here. But knowing that we're about out of time, I'll just switch to the end. Next slide, real quick. Team Kane, as I mentioned, we are a consulting service partner. We have been since 1995. We primarily do upgrades, migrations, spot consulting, etc. We do partner with a few different companies that we think have a best-of-breed tool that can help enhance how you are using JD Edwards. Click IT, Click It for Purgit, Forza Consulting with ScanMan, Pacman, SSPR, the Dimension Swift Test, Spreadsheet Server, RF Smart for automation in your warehouse. If you're not doing something in that space, you definitely should be, but we'd be very happy to talk to you about any of those as well. And next slide. So I mentioned send us an XML. We'll be more than happy to see how that looks in our template. My contact information is there. And then on the bottom of all these slides, if you haven't noticed, of course, we'll be at Collaborate, booth 331 out in Vegas. That's April 22nd to 26th. Hope to see all of you there. And absolutely, if you want to have a more detailed or maybe look at some of the finer points of the development work, if you are going to be in Vegas, we can schedule some time for you to sit down and we can definitely go into a little bit more detail with that. But I know we're right at 2 o'clock or just a minute after. As always, we appreciate how much everyone has going on in their day, so taking an hour to spend with us, thank you very much. Reminder, we do have that survey. If you could just take that extra minute and fill that out, we'll have that drawing for a $30 gift card. But Rain, thank you. Good job as always, and thank you to all of the attendees for joining us today. And as I said, if you have additional questions, please email or call, or we'll keep the webinar open for a couple of minutes. Feel free to put something into the question panel as well. With that, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.